Russell Nation. It has never been more over than it is right now. Just when we thought he was going to have a free run at the title this year, Kimi Antonelli said, "Hold my beer, Lewis Hamilton is in a relationship with Kim Kardashian. Wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that he placed second in the driver's standings. And Russell is nowhere near the top. I swear that has been the story of Russell his entire life. Why did a generational talent have to spawn from nowhere now that he's come so close? The current gap says 68 points, and I'm not sure it'll ever close, considering Russell has worse luck than Lando on a steering wheel." Just a few weeks ago in Canada, George Russell is leading the Grand Prix from pole position, has already won the sprint race earlier the same weekend by the way, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the 2026 season appeared to have finally run out of creative ways to ruin his afternoon. The pace was there, the car felt good, Kimi Antonelli was sitting in second going absolutely nowhere, and Russell was just managing the gap and ticking off laps. Everything was fine. Everything was under control. And then the battery failed, the car died on the side of the road, and Russell had to sit there like a good little boy and
unnecessary anger and borderline violence.
watch his own teammate drive past to take his fourth consecutive Grand Prix victory. Because the 2026 Formula 1 season apparently decided very early on that George Russell specifically was the bid it wanted to play with. What made this more annoying is that from the very start, Russell and Antonelli were locked in a fierce scrap for the lead. The two exchanged positions time and again like Lando and Zach Brown on a bed when no one is watching. 4 wins in a row by a 19-year-old in the same team, in what every single person in the paddock had agreed was going to be Russell's year. Then Monaco happened 2 weeks later, even worse than what happened in Canada. Russell picks up a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, which is annoying but manageable right up until the safety car comes out at the exact worst moment. Other drivers with the same penalty serve theirs cleanly in the pit window. Russell's team misses the timing, and the 5-second penalty becomes a drive-through penalty. And a potential podium becomes 12th place, and 12th place becomes 0 points in back-to-back races. And after all of that, George Russell stands in front of the media with the expression of a man who has been hit by a car, recovered, gone back outside, and hit by the same car again.
I'm flat. I'm beyond frustration, struggling to comprehend what is going on.
Which, honestly, is the most polite way any human being has ever described a slow-motion disaster of this particular scale. Here's where the championship stands at this exact moment in time. Kimi Antonelli, 156 points, George Russell, 88 points, Lewis Hamilton, who left the team, who now drives for Ferrari, who is supposed to be a chapter Russell already graduated past, sitting in second between them like he never actually left. And all of this happening in the season where Russell was the favorite, where Mercedes built a new regulations car around him, where every preseason data point and every pundit and every bookmaker had basically already printed the trophy. If you told me in February that this was going to be the standings in June, I wouldn't believe you. George Russell grew up in Norfolk and did the karting thing like every single Formula 1 driver in history is legally required to do before being allowed to compete at the top level. Seriously, has anyone ever made it to F1 without karting? Or is that just how the sport finds people? GP3 championship in 2017, done. Formula 2 championship in 2018 under genuine pressure in a title fight that went to the final races and required him to actually deliver rather than just cruise. 2 championships, 2 consecutive years. And by the time he was finishing up in F2, Mercedes had already decided they wanted him, turning down what was apparently a very real DTM opportunity to sign him to their junior program in 2017, before he had ever sat in a Formula 1 car. That kind of institutional belief, the kind where a team that has won everything decides you are the answer, is something most drivers chase for their entire careers and never find. Russell got it at 18. Then came Williams. And this is where the story gets genuinely interesting rather than just impressive. Williams in 2019 was a tractor. The car was so bad it was fighting for P16 on its good weekends. Russell got in it, drove it to the absolute limit every single weekend for 3 years, and out-qualified his teammate Robert Kubica at every single race in his debut season, every Saturday, in a car that was offering him essentially nothing to work with. Kubica was a legend, a man who had come back from a genuinely life-threatening accident, someone the entire paddock had enormous respect for, and Russell treated him with exactly that respect, by beating him so consistently. The car could be running on biscuit tin wheels and Russell would still be on the front row on Saturday. The 2020 Sakhir Grand Prix is the moment the wider world properly understood what Russell was, and it's one of the more almost moments in recent Formula 1 history. Hamilton tested positive for COVID, Mercedes called Russell up for one race mid-season, gave him essentially no preparation time whatsoever, sat him down in the fastest car on the grid opposite Valtteri Bottas, who had been driving it for the entire year, led the majority of the race, and then watched helplessly as a botched pit stop and a puncture combined to ruin what would have been one of the great debut wins the sport had ever seen. He finished 9th. after leading. In his first appearance in a Mercedes, Williams continued through 2021, and Russell kept producing results that got the car had no right to produce, dragging a Williams onto the podium in Belgium during the curtailed race, which counts however truncated it was, and which represented the team's first podium in years. And then 2022 came and Bottas was moved on, and the seat was Russell's, and he walked into the Mercedes garage as Lewis Hamilton's teammate, which, depending on your perspective, is either the greatest opportunity in the history of the sport or the highest pressure debut assignment you can give a 24-year-old. Hamilton had 7 championships. Hamilton had been synonymous with Mercedes for a decade. Hamilton was, by most serious measurements, the best driver who had ever climbed into a Formula One car, and Russell, in his first season as his teammate, beat him in the qualifying head-to-head more times than the headlines gave him credit for, won Brazil in a dominant and clean display that announced him as a genuine winner rather than just a talented qualifier, and began a process of succession that Hamilton himself probably knew was coming even if nobody was saying it yet. 2023 was harder because the Mercedes car was a difficult machine that year, the kind of car that punishes any mistake and rewards very little. And Russell ground out results and kept the team pointed in the right direction, while a lot of other drivers in similar situations would have started showing cracks. 2024 gave him Austria and Las Vegas, and Las Vegas in particular was a statement race. And then 2025 arrived and Hamilton officially left Ferrari, taking with him 7 championships and his extremely specific opinions about steering wheel design. And Russell became the team leader in every sense: his garage, his program, his title shot to chase. 2025 ended with Russell 4th in the championship on 319 points, 2 wins at Canada and Singapore, 9 podiums across the year, and the number that actually tells you the story: he out-qualified Kimi Antonelli over 20 times. He doubled his rookie teammate's points tally. In every metric you could apply, Russell was the senior driver.
How old do you think I am?
46.
The faster driver on Saturdays, and the driver that Mercedes was building their 2026 program around. Toto Wolff confirmed the contract, the team confirmed the hierarchy, and by January of 2026, the narrative had basically settled with new regulations: Mercedes best positioned, Hamilton gone, Verstappen struggling at Red Bull, Norris the defending champion but uncertain under a complete rule reset, and Russell as the man most likely to finally cash in on everything that had been building since he was 20 years old, winning races in a car that had no business being anywhere near points. Lando Norris, the reigning champion himself, described Russell as giddy about taking his title away from him. Pre-season testing in Bahrain confirmed it. Russell topped multiple sessions across both test weeks, the car looked properly quick, Mercedes had clearly understood the 2026 technical regulations in ways that some teams very obviously had not. And Russell sounded in every interview like a man who could see exactly what was in front of him and was ready to go get it. Everything pointed in one direction. And then, the lights went out in Melbourne for approximately 3 hours. The script was perfect. Australia, round 1. Russell takes pole, leads every lap, wins the race. Antonelli second, clean Mercedes 1-2. Everything looks exactly like it was supposed to look. One race into a season that was meant to be his, George Russell had won the opening round, and the gap between them looked larger than the gap between Verstappen and another WDC. Then China happened, and somewhere in the Mercedes garage, a gearbox decided it had heard enough about George Russell's championship ambitions and chose to express its feelings about the matter during Q3 qualifying. It handed Antonelli a free run at pole position that the Italian kid had absolutely not been on pace to take on his own, and Antonelli, who before 2026 had never taken a Formula One pole in his life, walked into the garage, found one sitting there with a bow on it, and took it. Then on Sunday, he won his first ever Grand Prix, also won the sprint race on Saturday, which at least meant the weekend wasn't a total write-off. But in the points column on the day that actually matters, Antonelli scored 25 and Russell scored 18, and the gap that was supposed to grow in Russell's favor had already started moving in completely the wrong direction before the European races had even started. Japan at Suzuka then arrived and managed to be even more annoying than China. Russell was genuinely quick all weekend, topped the first practice session, looked comfortable across the sessions, had the pace to challenge. Mercedes made a tiny setup adjustment to the rear of the car before qualifying, a small tweak that teams make dozens of times across a race weekend without incident, and it made the car handling worse immediately. Just enough worse that Russell spent qualifying fighting a fat ass that would not behave and qualified second. 3/10 off Antonelli, who was flying around Suzuka. It's either we need to have a serious conversation about their engineers or their decision making. And then, because the universe has a very specific sense of comedy when it comes to George Russell, he pitted one single lap before the safety car came out for Oliver Behrman's crash, which meant Antonelli, who had been running in the midfield at that point, got a free pit stop under yellow, came out in the lead, and won his second consecutive Grand Prix. Russell finished 4th. As we know, Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which were rounds 4 and 5 on the original 2026 calendar, were cancelled entirely due to the Iran war that broke out in the region. But that meant 2 full race weekends gone, 2 opportunities to reset the momentum and close the gap, just removed from the schedule. Miami arrived as round 4 after a 5-week gap, and it did not go well. And this one is worth being honest about because the mechanical excuse was not available. Antonelli took pole for the 3rd consecutive race, which for context is something that the 2025 version of Antonelli had never come close to doing. Won the race for the 3rd time in a row, and Russell finished 4th, 43 seconds behind his own teammate. 43. Russell said before that Miami is not a circuit that suits his driving style, that the low grip surface and the specific demands of the track do not play to his strengths.
Miami's a very low grip circuit. Just a track I've never really liked.
Which is at least a real and honest explanation rather than a dodge. But 43 seconds is a large gap to explain away with circuit characteristics. Antonelli was now the official title favorite. Russell was 20 points behind in his own car, in his own team, in his own year. Then Canada and Monaco delivered 2 devastating blows as we mentioned earlier. But underneath all of that is a situation where Kimi Antonelli has been, at specific circuits and in specific conditions, simply faster than Russell on pure pace, which essentially no serious analyst predicted going into the year and which changes the texture of the story even if it does not change the sympathy. In 2025, he was a promising rookie in a clearly secondary role, genuinely agreeable about team orders and learning his trade without causing any real friction. In 2026, under completely new technical regulations, the same driver has taken pole at 3 consecutive Grand Prix, won 4 in a row. That is an extraordinary shift. And it's either the result of a car that suits his driving style far better than the 2025 machinery did, or a driver who developed at a rate that this sport rarely sees, or probably both of those things at the same time. And either way, it means that George Russell is not just fighting the cruelest luck of his career, he is fighting a teenager who has become genuinely, properly special at the precise moment Russell needed him to still be learning. Which is, when you think about it, a very George Russell thing to have happened. Because his entire career has been defined by the person sitting in the garage next door and what the contrast between them reveals about who he is. Kubica at Williams showed that Russell could be completely dominant and completely respectful about it at the same time, extracting maximum performance from minimum equipment while treating a returning legend with genuine dignity. Nicholas Latifi showed the same thing with considerably less complexity. The dominance gap was so wide it stopped being a comparison and started being a solo performance. Hamilton was the real examination, the one that the sport had been waiting to see, and Russell passed it by not demolishing the 7-time champion in his first season, but by being consistently close enough that the question of succession answered itself without anyone having to say a word. And now Antonelli, who was supposed to be the chapter where Russell had the obvious upper hand for the first time in his Mercedes career, had turned into something much more interesting and much more inconvenient. There are 16 races left in 2026. Formula 1 seasons have been won from much further behind by drivers with less ability, and the 2026 season has shown enough chaos already that the next 16 races have no obligation to be straightforward. Russell knows this, which is why even in his most frustrated post-race moments, he has not once suggested it is over or started looking for exits. It's never over until it's over. Strip out the gearbox failure in China, the software bug in Japan, the safety car timing, and the Canada battery explosion, and the championship is a fight. The points that were lost were not lost because Russell was not good enough, they were lost because the universe has a specific and deeply personal sense of humor when it comes to George Russell. George Russell is 28 years old. He's been building toward this specific moment since he was a teenager, winning consecutive championships in the junior categories. And the only thing currently standing between him and the season has been owed for a very long time is a 19-year-old who decided that 2026 was the year he wanted to become one of the best drivers on the grid. George Russell waited at Williams. He waited behind Hamilton. He waited for the regulations to swing in his direction. And now with the car he helped develop and the team he helped rebuild and the title shot he absolutely earned, he is waiting again. This time for the luck to even out and the gap to close and the 16 remaining races to give him what the first 6 tried so hard to take away. The disaster is real. The points gap is real, but so is George Russell.
What are your first words after your race?
Speechless. pretty lonely.
Speechless and speedless?
Yeah, that's a nice one.
And 16 races is a lot of time for a man who spent 3 years at Williams to start making things very uncomfortable for Antonelli. Watch this space, because Russell might make a comeback.